Marcus stood in his backyard, staring at the empty crater where his pool used to be. 15 years of memories gone. His hands were still shaking when he heard the sirens. Through the fence, he saw her, Corinne from next door, arms crossed, that smug smile plastered across her face as two police cruisers pulled up to his driveway. "Officers, that man destroyed valuable property that affects my home value," she declared, pointing at him like he'd committed murder. Marcus felt his blood run cold. He just buried his daughter's ashes beneath where that pool had been, and Corinne had no idea what she just walked into. Marcus Chen pressed his palm against the freshly poured concrete, still slightly warm from the afternoon sun. The construction crew had left an hour ago, their trucks rumbling away down Maple Street, leaving behind a flat, gray expanse where his swimming pool had existed for 16 years. 16 years. Emma had been 2 when they'd installed it. She'd learned to swim in that pool, celebrated every birthday with cannonballs and laughter echoing off the privacy fence. The water had sparkled under summer suns while his daughter floated on rainbow rafts, her dark hair fanning out like silk. Now Emma was gone, and Marcus had needed the pool gone too. His wife Sarah stood beside him, her hand finding his. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. The pool had become a monument to loss, every ripple a reminder that Emma would never splash in it again. The accident had happened 6 months ago, a drunk driver, a rainy night, 18 years old and gone in an instant. The concrete wasn't just covering an empty pool. Beneath it, in a biodegradable urn, were Emma's ashes. Sarah had suggested it during one of their midnight conversations, the ones where grief made everything raw and honest. She loved that pool more than anything, Sarah had whispered. Let her rest where she was happiest. Marcus had called the contractors the next day. "Mr. Chen." The voice sliced through his thoughts. Marcus turned to find his neighbor, Corinne Whitmore, standing at the fence line, her phone already in her hand, recording. She was a thin woman with sharp features and an expression that always looked like she'd just bitten into something sour. "What have you done?" Corinne demanded, her voice rising with each word. "That was a swimming pool, a beautiful in-ground pool. Do you have any idea what you've done to my property value?" Marcus blinked, processing her words slowly. "My property value." "Our properties share a fence line," Corinne snapped, gesturing wildly. "That pool added appeal to the entire neighborhood. I was planning to sell next spring, and now you've gone and she sputtered, waving at the concrete slab. "You've destroyed it, without warning, without consulting anyone." Sarah stepped forward, her voice tight. "Corinne, this is our property. We don't need to consult." "Community standards," Corinne interrupted, her face reddening. "We have HOA guidelines. You can't just make major changes without approval. I'm calling them right now. And I'm calling the city. You probably didn't even get permits." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. "Corinne, please, not today." But she was already dialing, her fingers jabbing at her phone with righteous fury. "This is exactly what's wrong with this neighborhood. People think they can do whatever they want. Consequences be damned. Well, not on my watch. Hello? Yes, I need to report an unpermitted construction project." Marcus watched her pace along the fence, voice growing shriller, as she demanded immediate action from whatever poor city employee had answered her call. Sarah squeezed his hand harder. "Let her make her calls," Sarah murmured. "We did everything legally." They had. Marcus had spent 2 months navigating permits, environmental assessments, and contractor schedules. Everything was documented, filed, approved. But Corinne's voice carried over the fence like nails on a chalkboard, and Marcus felt exhaustion settle into his bones. "I want someone out here today," Corinne was saying. "This is unacceptable. The noise alone was a violation, trucks and drilling for 3 days straight. I have rights as a homeowner." "I what?" "No, I don't know if hold on." Corinne lowered her phone, glaring at Marcus. "Did you get permits?" "Yes." "I don't believe you, show me." Marcus turned away, pulling Sarah toward their house. "I don't owe you anything, Karen. Please leave us alone." "Don't you walk away from me," Karen shrieked. "I'm not done talking to you. This isn't over, Marcus. You haven't heard the last of this." Inside, Marcus sagged against the kitchen counter. Through the window, he could still see Karen packing, making more calls, her free hand gesturing animatedly. Sarah started making tea, a habit she'd developed since Emma died, something to do with her hands when the grief became physical. "She doesn't know," Sarah said quietly. "No." They hadn't told the neighbors, hadn't posted about Emma's death on social media. Grief was private and they'd wanted to process it without becoming the neighborhood tragedy. Only their closest friends and family knew. Apparently, that had been a mistake. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his brother David. "Karen Whitmore just called Mom asking about that mess in your backyard. What's going on?" Then another. "She's posting in the neighborhood Facebook group." Marcus didn't have Facebook anymore. He deleted it after Emma died, unable to face the condolence messages. But Sarah did. She pulled it up on her phone and they read together. Karen's post was 3 paragraphs of outrage, complete with photos taken over the fence. She'd written about irresponsible neighbors, property destruction, and neighborhood standards. The comments were already rolling in, most from people who didn't know the Chens well enough to understand, asking questions, expressing concern about their own property values. "We should explain," Sarah said, but her voice was hollow. They both knew what explaining meant, turning Emma's death into public consumption, their grief into something for neighbors to dissect over morning coffee. "Not yet," Marcus replied. His phone rang. City Planning Department. "Mr. Chen, this is Building Inspector Rodriguez. I've received multiple complaints about a pool removal at your address. I see here that you pulled permits back in September, and they're all in order, but I'm going to need to come out and verify that the work matches what was filed. Are you available tomorrow morning?" "Yes." 9 a.m. work. "Fine." And Mr. Chen, the person who called, she mentioned something about environmental concerns. "You disposed of all pool chemicals properly." "Everything was handled by licensed contractors. I have all the documentation." "Good, bring that tomorrow. See you at 9. Marcus set down his phone as Sarah's started ringing. Then the doorbell. Through the front window, Marcus saw a police cruiser in his driveway. His stomach dropped. Sarah met his eyes. She didn't. But Karen had. Because when Marcus opened the door, 2 officers stood on his porch, and behind them, standing at the edge of his lawn with her arms crossed and that triumphant smile on her face, was Karen Whitmore. "Officers," Karen called out, her voice carrying clear and sharp. "That man destroyed valuable property that affects MY home value. I demand you do something about this. He's been hostile, he's refused to cooperate, and I have every right to protect my investment." Officer Martinez, according to his nameplate, looked tired. His partner, a younger woman named Officer Chen, no relation, had her hand resting on her belt, watching Karen with barely concealed annoyance. "Mr. Chen," Martinez said, "we need to ask you some questions about the construction work done at this property." Marcus felt Sarah move beside him, her hand finding his again. The concrete in the backyard was still warm. Emma's ashes were still settling into their final rest. And Karen Whitmore was still talking, her voice rising in pitch, demanding justice, demanding action, demanding satisfaction. Martinez's radio crackled. He glanced at it, then back at Marcus. "Sir, can we come inside?" Marcus looked past them at Karen, at her satisfied expression, at the phone she was holding up, recording everything. "Yes," Marcus said quietly, his voice breaking on the single word. "Yes, officer, please come in." Officer Martinez sat at the Chen's dining room table, his notebook open but untouched. His partner, Officer Reyes, Marcus had misread her nameplate in his panic, stood by the window, watching Karen pace outside like a sentry guarding hostile territory. "Let me get this straight," Martinez said, rubbing his temple. "You removed a swimming pool on your own property, with permits." "Yes," Marcus replied. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "And Ms. Whitmore called 911 because she claims it affects her property value," Sarah interjected, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "She's upset we didn't consult her before making changes to our own backyard." Reyes turned from the window, her expression unreadable. "Did she call 911? Martinez checked his phone. Dispatch notes say she called the non-emergency line first, 4 times in 3 hours, then called 911 claiming property destruction and hostile behavior. "I've barely spoken to her," Marcus said. "That tracks," Martinez muttered. "Mr. Chen, do you have the permits she mentioned?" Marcus retrieved a folder from his study, returning with every document the city had issued. Martinez flipped through them, his expression growing more annoyed with each page. "These are in perfect order, approved by planning, inspections scheduled and passed. You even went above minimum requirements on the environmental impact assessment." He looked up. "Why?" The question hung in the air. Sarah's hand found Marcus's under the table. "Personal reasons," Marcus said quietly. Martinez studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in the officer's expression, a softening around the eyes that suggested he recognized the weight of grief when he saw it. "Look," Martinez said, closing the folder. "Ms. Whitmore is within her rights to express concerns, but she's filed a false police report. There's no property destruction, no crime, no violation. If she continues to harass you, that becomes an issue we can address." Through the window, Karen was gesturing animatedly at someone. Another neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, who'd stopped her evening walk. "She's telling everyone," Sarah whispered. Reyes moved away from the window. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Chen, I need to ask directly. Is there something going on that would help us understand the situation? Because I've dealt with Ms. Whitmore before. Noise complaint about a teenager's birthday party, dispute over a tree branch, accusation that someone's Christmas lights were too bright. She's persistent. But this feels different." Marcus looked at Sarah. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Our daughter died 6 months ago," Marcus said, the words like gravel in his throat. "She was 18, car accident, the pool was. We couldn't keep looking at it. She learned to swim there, spent every summer there. We had her cremated and she's buried under the concrete. We wanted her to rest where she was happiest." The room fell silent except for the kitchen clock ticking on the wall. Martinez closed his eyes briefly. Reyes' professional mask cracked completely. "Jesus," Martinez breathed. "I'm so sorry." "We haven't told the neighbors," Sarah added. "We're private people. We didn't want," her voice broke. "We didn't want this to become neighborhood gossip. But now Karen's posting about it online and people are asking questions, and we just wanted to grieve in peace." Reyes sat down at the table, her voice gentle. "You're not obligated to explain yourselves to anyone. This is your property, your decision, your grief, and Ms. Whitmore has no legal standing whatsoever." "But she won't stop," Marcus said. "You don't know her. She's like a dog with a bone when she thinks she's right. She'll call the city, the HOA, probably the news if she thinks it'll get her somewhere." Martinez stood, picking up his folder. "Let us handle Ms. Whitmore. But I'm going to be honest with you. We can explain that there's no violation, but we can't force her to stop talking about it. If she posts on social media or talks to neighbors, that's her right, as long as she's not defaming you." "What she's doing," Sarah said quietly, "is dancing on our daughter's grave, literally." The officers exchanged glances. Reyes spoke first. "Give us a few minutes with her." They watched through the window as Martinez and Reyes approached Karen, who immediately launched into what was clearly a prepared speech, pointing at the house, at the backyard, at her own property. Mrs. Patterson had been joined by two other neighbors, young couple from the corner, names Marcus could never remember. Martinez held up his hand, cutting off Corinne's monologue. He spoke briefly, his body language professional but firm. Corinne's expression shifted from righteous anger to confusion to something that might have been horror. Her phone dropped to her side. Martinez gestured toward the Chen's house. Corinne shook her head violently, backing away. The other neighbors were staring at her now, Mrs. Patterson's hand covering her mouth. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but he watched as understanding rippled through the small group. Mrs. Patterson said something sharp to Corinne, then turned and walked quickly toward her own house. The young couple followed, glancing back at Corinne with expressions of disgust. Corinne stood alone on the lawn, her face pale, as Martinez and Reyes returned to their cruiser. She looked toward the house once, meeting Marcus's eyes through the window, then fled back to her own property. The doorbell rang 10 minutes later. Marcus opened it to find Mrs. Patterson, her eyes red. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "About Emma. Marcus, Sarah, I'm so incredibly sorry. If I'd known, I never would have. Corinne told us you were violating HOA rules, that you destroyed property maliciously. She made it sound like you were deliberately hurting the neighborhood." "It's fine, Agnes." "It's not fine. What she did, standing out there, recording, calling the police while you were," Mrs. Patterson's voice cracked. "Emma was such a bright light. I remember her helping me with my garden 2 summers ago. She had such a gentle way with the roses." Sarah appeared beside Marcus, and Mrs. Patterson pulled her into a hug that Sarah returned stiffly, her body rigid with the effort of not breaking down completely. "Thank you," Sarah managed. After Mrs. Patterson left, more neighbors came. Some Marcus barely knew. They brought casseroles, the universal language of suburban sympathy, and hushed apologies and promises that Corinne would be dealt with. The neighborhood Facebook group, Marcus learned, had exploded. Corinne's post had been deleted by moderators, and several people had posted tributes to Emma, sharing photos from neighborhood gatherings, memories of a girl who'd babysat their kids and walked their dogs and brought in their trash cans when they forgot. Corinne had posted one comment before being removed from the group entirely. "How was I supposed to know?" Marcus stood in his backyard as darkness fell, staring at the concrete slab. Someone had left flowers at the edge, Mrs. Patterson probably. The gesture was kind but felt intrusive. This was supposed to be private. His phone buzzed. The neighborhood HOA president, Tom Richardson. "Marcus, I just heard. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow to discuss how this situation was handled. Corinne filed a formal complaint about your pool removal 3 hours ago. I want to make it clear that her complaint is being dismissed entirely, and we're reviewing whether her behavior constitutes harassment under our community guidelines." "Tom, you don't need to." "Yes, we do. She called the police on a grieving family over property values. That's beyond the pale. The board will be voting on sanctions, possibly including removal from the HOA board. She's been secretary for 5 years, and honestly, this isn't the first time she's overstepped." After Tom hung up, Marcus sat on the back porch steps. Sarah joined him, bringing 2 mugs of tea neither would drink. "Everyone knows now," she said. "Yes." "Is that better or worse?" Marcus didn't answer. In the distance, he could hear Corinne's voice through her open window, high and defensive, talking to someone on the phone, justifying herself, explaining that she couldn't have known, that it wasn't her fault, that anyone would have done the same thing. "She still doesn't understand," Sarah observed. "No, she thinks this is about what she knew versus what she didn't know. She doesn't understand that it wouldn't have mattered if we'd filled the pool with cotton candy. It's our property, our choice, our grief. She'll figure it out when the HOA meets." "Will she?" Sarah leaned against him. "The concrete looks good. The contractor did quality work." "Emma would have hated it. She'd have wanted us to keep the pool, fill it with her friends every summer, let it stay alive. Emma would have wanted whatever made us able to breathe again, Sarah corrected gently. And this was what we needed. Through the fence, Marcus heard Corinne's voice rise. It's not fair. I was protecting the neighborhood. How is this my fault? Marcus closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring the city inspector, the HOA meeting, probably more neighbors with more casseroles and more apologies. But tonight, in the darkness, with Sarah beside him and Emma resting beneath fresh concrete in the place she'd loved most, there was only quiet. And from next door, the sound of Corinne Whitmore learning that the world didn't revolve around her property values. Building Inspector Rodriguez arrived at exactly 9 a.m., a stocky man with a clipboard and an expression that suggested he'd already dealt with enough nonsense for one day. Marcus led him to the backyard, where the concrete had fully cured overnight, a smooth gray expanse that reflected the morning sun. Rodriguez walked the perimeter, checking measurements against his permit documents, taking photos, making notes. Corinne's face appeared in her second-story window, watching with binoculars. Everything matches the filed plans, Rodriguez said after 20 minutes. Excavation depth, concrete specifications, drainage considerations. Your contractors did exemplary work. Honestly, this is one of the cleanest pool removals I've inspected. He glanced at the window where Corinne's silhouette was still visible. I understand this project has generated some controversy. My neighbor doesn't approve. Rodriguez snorted. Your neighbor called my office 17 times yesterday. 17. She claimed you were creating environmental hazards, violating setback requirements, and, I'm quoting here, destroying the neighborhood character with concrete brutalism. He looked at the neat slab, surrounded by grass and flower beds. That's not brutalism. That's a patio. We're planning to put in a garden, Sarah said from the porch. Roses. Emma loved roses. Rodriguez's pen stilled on his clipboard. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Sarah, and understanding crossed his features. The officers mentioned, I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I'll file the final inspection approval today. You're completely in the clear, Mr. Chen. If Ms. Whitmore calls again, I'll be referring her to our harassment policy. After Rodriguez left, Marcus went inside to find Sarah at her laptop, staring at the screen with an expression somewhere between fury and disbelief. What? She turned the laptop toward him. The neighborhood Facebook group, she'd been added back to it by 3 different neighbors overnight, had a new post from Corinne. I've been asked to apologize for my concerns about the Chen property modifications. While I understand they've experienced a personal loss, I maintain that proper communication with adjoining property owners is a courtesy that benefits everyone. Moving forward, I hope we can all work together to maintain neighborhood standards while respecting individual circumstances. I'm committed to being a good neighbor despite recent misunderstandings. Marcus read it twice. She didn't apologize. She said she was asked to apologize and then didn't actually do it. Keep reading, Sarah said tightly. The comments were brutal. Tom Richardson, the HOA president, had written, Corinne, this apology has been reviewed by the board. It is insufficient. You called the police on a family grieving their child's death because you were worried about property values. Your behavior was unconscionable. The emergency board meeting is tonight at 7 p.m. Your attendance is mandatory. Below that, dozens of neighbors had piled on, some gently, explaining why Corinne's post was offensive, others less so. One comment from a user named Jennifer Vasquez read, You stood in their driveway recording while police questioned them about their daughter's grave. What is wrong with you? Corinne had responded to that one, I didn't know it was a grave. Jennifer's reply, That's the point. You didn't know anything but decided to cause a scene anyway. You could have walked over and had a conversation like a normal person. Instead, you called 911. The thread had over 200 comments and was still growing. The internet is undefeated, Marcus muttered. Sarah closed the laptop. The HOA meeting is tonight. Do we go? I don't think we have a choice. Tom texted me this morning. They want our statement about what happened. The day crept by with agonizing slowness. Marcus tried to work. He had engineering reports due, but couldn't focus. Sarah moved through the house like a ghost, picking up objects and setting them down, starting tasks and abandoning them. At 6 p.m., Mrs. Patterson appeared at the door with a casserole, chicken enchiladas, Emma's favorite, and an offer to attend the meeting as character witnesses. You don't need to do that, Agnes. Yes, we do. Corinne's been making calls all day trying to find people who will support her version of events. She called me 3 times saying she's being persecuted for caring about property values and that you're weaponizing grief. She actually said that, weaponizing grief. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. She said that. To multiple people. Some of them are buying it. The Hendersons down on Oak Street don't really know you, and Corinne's telling them this is about HOA overreach. She's painting herself as a victim of political correctness run amok. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. But most of us remember Emma, and we're not letting Corinne rewrite this story. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a bland room with folding chairs and a water-stained ceiling. Marcus and Sarah arrived to find it packed, at least 50 people, maybe more, filling every seat with others standing along the walls. The usual meetings drew maybe 15 people, mostly retirees with nothing better to do. Tom Richardson sat at a folding table at the front with the other board members, 4 total including Corinne, who sat at the far end with her arms crossed and her jaw set. She dressed carefully, Marcus noticed. Business casual, hair perfect, the armor of someone preparing for battle. Tom called the meeting to order with a rap of his gavel. We have one item on tonight's agenda. A formal complaint was filed by Board Secretary Corinne Whitmore regarding unpermitted construction at 847 Maple Street, owned by Marcus and Sarah Chen. The city has since confirmed all permits were properly filed and approved. However, Ms. Whitmore's actions in pursuing this complaint have raised serious concerns about board member conduct and community relations. Corinne stood immediately. Point of order. This isn't a fair process. I filed a legitimate complaint through proper channels. I followed protocol. Now I'm being persecuted because of emotions and... Sit down, Corinne, Tom said flatly. You'll have your chance to speak. First, I want to hear from the Chens. All eyes turned to Marcus and Sarah. Marcus felt Sarah's hand find his, squeezing hard enough to hurt. Marcus stood slowly. The room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Our daughter Emma died 6 months ago, he began, his voice rough. She was 18, a drunk driver. We had her cremated and we decided to lay her to rest in the place where she was happiest, our backyard pool where she'd spent every summer of her life. To do this, we removed the pool and buried her ashes beneath new concrete. We obtained all necessary permits. We hired licensed contractors. We followed every rule and regulation. He paused, his throat tight. We didn't tell our neighbors because grief is private. We weren't trying to hide anything. We were trying to survive. Corinne found out about the pool removal and immediately decided it was a threat to her property values. She never asked why. Never knocked on our door to have a conversation. She called the city, called the HOA, posted on social media, and ultimately called the police, demanding we be investigated for property destruction. Sarah stood beside him. She did this while Emma was still settling into her final resting place. While we were standing in our backyard, saying goodbye to our child, Corinne was on her phone, calling authorities, taking pictures over the fence. She recorded us being questioned by police officers, and her only regret based on her social media posts is that she didn't know the context before she acted. Marcus's voice hardened. But that's the point. She shouldn't have needed to know. Our property, our decision, our family. She had no right to weaponize authorities against us, regardless of her assumptions. The room had gone completely still. Several people were crying openly. Corinne's face had gone pale, but her jaw remained set. Tom nodded slowly. "Thank you, Corinne, you're entitled to respond." Corinne stood, smoothing her blouse with shaking hands. "I understand that emotions are running high, and I'm truly sorry for the Chen family's loss. Emma was a lovely girl, but I need everyone to understand that I acted in good faith. Major property modifications do affect surrounding home values. That's a fact, not an opinion. If Marcus had simply told me what he was planning or why, this all could have been avoided." "You're blaming me," Marcus said, his voice rising, "for not telling you my daughter was dead before I made changes to my own property. I'm saying communication matters. We live in a community, Marcus. We're supposed to look out for each other, share information that affects us all. My daughter's death doesn't affect you, Corinne. Your property modifications do." The room erupted, multiple people shouting at once, voices overlapping in anger and disbelief. Tom banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Agnes Patterson stood up. "Corinne, listen to yourself. You're standing here in front of 50 witnesses, arguing that you deserved advance notice about a child's burial. Do you hear how that sounds?" "That's not what I—" "That's exactly what you're saying," another voice called out. Jennifer Vasquez. Marcus recognized her from Facebook. "You're saying your property values matter more than their privacy, more than their grief, more than basic human decency." Corinne's face flushed red. "This is absurd. I'm being vilified for following HOA procedures." "You called 911, Tom said quietly, and the room fell silent. "Corinne, you called 911 and reported a crime. There was no crime. You filed a false police report because you were angry that a neighbor made changes to their own property without consulting you. Changes they were legally entitled to make. Changes that had nothing to do with you." "I didn't file a false report. I reported what I believed to be." "You believed wrong. And instead of accepting that, instead of apologizing, you've spent the last 24 hours calling neighbors to build support for your version of events, claiming you're being persecuted, and that the Chens are weaponizing grief. Multiple people have brought those quotes to the board's attention." Corinne looked around the room, seeing no sympathy, only anger and disgust. "This is a witch hunt." "No," Tom said. "This is accountability. The board votes on your removal as secretary, effective immediately, and a formal censure that will be noted in HOA records. All in favor?" 3 hands went up immediately. Corinne's was the only abstention. Motion carries. "Corinne, you're removed from the board. Furthermore, if you continue to contact neighbors about this situation, to post about it on social media, or to harass the Chen family in any way, the HOA will pursue legal action for harassment. Are we clear?" Corinne grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "This isn't over. You can't silence me. I have rights." "Yes, you do," Tom agreed. "And the Chens have the right to grieve without you turning it into a property value calculation. Meeting adjourned." Corinne stormed out, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. The room exhaled collectively. Then neighbors swarmed Marcus and Sarah with hugs, apologies, and quiet words of support. Through the window, Marcus watched Corinne get into her car, her face illuminated by her phone screen as she furiously typed something, probably posting about this meeting, about how unfairly she'd been treated, about how the world had gone mad. Sarah leaned close. "Is it over?" Marcus thought about the look on Corinne's face as she'd left, humiliated, furious, unrepentant. "I don't think so," he said quietly. The for sale sign appeared in Corinne's yard 3 days after the HOA meeting. A sleek, professional placard with a realtor's smiling face and a phone number in bold red letters. Sarah spotted it first from the kitchen window while making coffee. "She's selling," Sarah said, and Marcus wasn't sure if the emotion in her voice was relief or concern. "Good riddance," Marcus muttered, but he felt uneasy. Karen wasn't the type to retreat quietly. The sign felt less like surrender and more like opening move in a new game. He was right. That afternoon, Marcus returned from the grocery store to find a woman in a navy blazer examining his property from the sidewalk, making notes on a tablet. Her car, a silver Mercedes with dealer plates, sat in Karen's driveway. "Can I help you?" Marcus called out, setting down grocery bags. The woman turned, professional smile already in place. "Hi, I'm Diane Mitchell, Karen's listing agent. Just doing preliminary comps for her property valuation. Beautiful home you have here." "Thank you." Diane's eyes lingered on the backyard, visible through the open gate Marcus had forgotten to close. "I noticed you removed your pool recently. That's a significant change. Pools typically add 15 to 20% to property values in this neighborhood. Was there a structural issue?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Personal reasons." Of course. I'm just nodding for the listing that the adjoining property no longer has that amenity. Help set realistic expectations for potential buyers." She smiled brighter. "You understand, transparency is crucial in real estate." After she left, Marcus found Sarah in the backyard, staring at the concrete slab with an expression he couldn't read. "She sent her realtor to assess the damage," Marcus said. "I know, I was watching from the window." Sarah's voice was flat. "She's going to tank our property value out of spite." "She can't. Our property is our property. Her sale price doesn't affect our value." "Doesn't it? If she tells every potential buyer that the neighbors are difficult, that we've removed valuable amenities, that we're hostile to community concerns." Sarah trailed off. "We were thinking about downsizing in a few years, moving somewhere smaller now that Emma's," her voice broke. "Now that it's just us, what if she's poisoned our ability to sell?" Marcus had no answer. He'd been thinking the same thing. The neighborhood Facebook group provided unwelcome confirmation that evening. Someone had posted a screenshot of Karen's house listing. It wasn't officially live yet, but a preview was circulating among agents. The description was carefully worded but damning. "Charming 4-bedroom home in established neighborhood. Beautiful views, mature landscaping, excellent schools. Note: neighboring property recently underwent significant modifications, including removal of in-ground pool and installation of concrete pad. Buyers should verify current neighborhood amenities and any potential impact on property values with their agent." The comments section exploded again. Some defended the description as factually accurate. Others called it petty and vindictive. Tom Richardson posted, "This borders on defamation. The Chen property modifications were fully permitted and legal." Karen responded. She was apparently still lurking in the group despite being removed from the HOA board. "It's called disclosure. Buyers have a right to know what they're moving next to. I'm not mentioning personal situations, just facts about property modifications." Jennifer Vasquez replied, "You're weaponizing the real estate process, again." Marcus closed Facebook and tried to sleep, but couldn't. At 2 a.m., he found himself standing in the backyard, staring at Emma's resting place. This was supposed to bring peace. Instead, it had ignited a war. The open house happened the following Saturday. Karen had positioned it aggressively. Balloons, signs every 50 feet, and an exclusive broker's open on Friday that drew a parade of real estate agents through her property. Marcus and Sarah tried to ignore it, but it was impossible to miss the cars, the voices, the way every agent paused to look at their house with appraising, calculating eyes. One agent knocked on their door Saturday afternoon. Young man, expensive suit, card already in hand. "Hi, Jordan Peters, Berkshire Realty. I'm showing the Whitmore property next door, and several of my buyers have questions about your backyard modifications. Would you be willing to chat for just a few minutes about your plans for the concrete area? Are you planning a pool house, extended patio, anything that might enhance the shared fence line aesthetic?" No, Marcus said. Totally understand, just asking. Some of my buyers are young families, and they're weighing whether the neighborhood still has the family-friendly amenities they're looking for. A pool next door can be a real selling point for. Our daughter is buried under that concrete, Marcus said flatly. Is that family-friendly enough for your buyers? Jordan's smile evaporated. He backed away, stammering apologies, and practically ran to his car. 10 minutes later, Karen was at their door, face flushed with fury. How dare you tell my potential buyers that? Jordan just called my agent, saying he's pulling his clients from consideration because the neighbors are hostile and dealing with traumatic circumstances. You're sabotaging my sale. I answered his question, Marcus said coldly. He asked about the concrete. I told him what's under it. You didn't have to be so graphic. You didn't have to weaponize Emma's death against me. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah appeared beside Marcus, her face pale. Weaponize, Sarah repeated softly. Karen, do you hear yourself? Our daughter is dead. We buried her in our backyard because it's where she was happiest. And you're calling that weaponization because it interferes with your real estate transaction. That's not what you're twisting my words. No, Marcus said. We're finally understanding them. You don't care about Emma. You don't care about our grief. You care about money. That's all you've ever cared about. And you're angry that grief doesn't fit neatly into your property value calculations. Karen's eyes filled with tears, not sadness, Marcus realized, but frustration. You don't understand what this is costing me. I've already dropped my asking price $15,000 because of concerns about the neighborhood dynamics. $15,000. That's real money. That's my retirement, my future, My daughter is dead, Sarah said, her voice like steel. Your future is $15,000 lighter. Do you understand that those two things are not equivalent? Karen stared at them, opening and closing her mouth like a fish. Finally, she whispered, "This isn't fair," and fled back to her house. The open house continued Sunday. Marcus counted 18 groups touring Karen's property. That evening, Diane the realtor knocked on their door again, this time with Karen hovering behind her. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Diane said carefully, "we need to have a conversation about the situation next door. Several potential buyers have withdrawn from consideration after learning about the circumstances. Karen's property is beautiful, well-maintained, and priced competitively, but the emotional weight of the adjoining property is creating problems. Is there any way we can discuss this like adults?" "There's nothing to discuss," Sarah said. "We're not changing anything. We're not moving. We're not apologizing for grieving our child." "Of course not," Diane said smoothly. "But perhaps there's a compromise. If you were planning any landscaping improvements around the concrete area, flowers perhaps, or decorative elements, that might help potential buyers see it as a memorial garden rather than just a concrete slab. First impressions matter in real estate, and right now the visual from Karen's backyard window is stark." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. "You want us to landscape our daughter's grave to improve your client's property value. I'm suggesting that what's good for property values might also honor your daughter's memory. Win-win." "Get off my porch," Marcus said quietly. "Mr. Chen." "Now, both of you. And if anyone else from your agency contacts us about our property, about our daughter, or about anything related to our private family business, I'm filing harassment charges. Am I clear?" Diane and Karen retreated, but Marcus could hear them arguing in hushed voices on the sidewalk. Diane explaining something about disclosure requirements, Karen's voice rising in pitch, insisting there had to be legal recourse. The situation reached critical mass 3 days later when Marcus received a certified letter from Diane's brokerage. Sarah read it aloud in disbelief. "This letter serves as formal notice that the visual condition of your property as viewed from 849 Maple Street is materially affecting the marketability of said property. While we acknowledge your right to modify your own property, we respectfully request that you consider aesthetic improvements that would minimize negative impact on neighboring property values. We are prepared to discuss reasonable accommodation, including cost sharing for landscaping improvements. They're offering to pay us to make Emma's grave look prettier, Sarah said, her voice hollow. Marcus reread the letter 3 times, feeling something hot and dark building in his chest. Call Tom Richardson and call our lawyer. This is harassment. Marcus, lawyers are expensive. I don't care, this ends now. But before Marcus could make the calls, his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Melissa Robbins from Channel 7 News. I'm working on a story about neighborhood conflicts and real estate disputes, and your situation with your neighbor Corinne Whitmore came to our attention. Would you be willing to go on camera to share your side of the story? Marcus's blood ran cold. How did you hear about this? An anonymous tip to our consumer advocacy desk. Someone sent us screenshots of the neighborhood Facebook group and the real estate listing description. It's a compelling story: grief, community conflict, property rights. Very timely given current debates about HOA overreach and... Marcus hung up. 2 minutes later, a news van pulled onto Maple Street. Through the window, Marcus watched a reporter and cameraman set up on the sidewalk, filming Corinne's house, then his. Neighbors emerged from their homes, curious. Mrs. Patterson appeared at his door. Marcus, there are reporters. I know. Corinne called them. I heard her on the phone an hour ago, talking to someone about getting her story out there before you could manipulate the narrative. Sarah joined them at the door, watching the circus unfold. The reporter, Melissa Robbins, presumably, was now interviewing Corinne on her front lawn. Corinne was gesturing animatedly, face earnest, playing the victim. This has to stop, Sarah said quietly. Marcus, it has to stop. We can't keep doing this. Emma deserves peace, and all we've done is turn her resting place into a battlefield. Marcus pulled out his phone and called the number from the news tip. Melissa answered on the first ring. Ms. Robbins, this is Marcus Chen. You want a story? Meet me in my backyard in 30 minutes. Bring your camera. Mr. Chen, 30 minutes. You'll get the full story, everything on camera. But after this, you leave my family alone. Do we have a deal? A pause. Deal. Marcus hung up and looked at Sarah. I'm ending this. Melissa Robbins and her cameraman arrived precisely 30 minutes later. Through the fence, Marcus could see Corinne's face in her window, pale and uncertain. She'd called the news, but now the news was at the Chen's door, and she clearly hadn't expected that. Good, let her worry. Marcus led them to the backyard, where the concrete slab sat in afternoon sunlight. Sarah had placed fresh roses at one edge that morning, pink ones, Emma's favorite. They looked small and vulnerable against the gray expanse. We're rolling, the cameraman said. Melissa positioned herself beside Marcus, microphone ready. She was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that evaluated everything. Mr. Chen, thank you for speaking with us. Can you explain what we're looking at here? Marcus took a breath. This is my daughter's grave, Emma Chen. She died 6 months ago in a car accident. She was 18. We had her cremated and we buried her ashes under this concrete in the place where she spent every summer of her life, our swimming pool. And your neighbor objected to this. My neighbor never asked what it was. She saw that we'd removed the pool and decided it was destroying her property value. She called the city, called our HOA, posted about it on social media, and ultimately called the police while we were standing here, grieving our child. She recorded us being questioned by officers. She never once asked why we'd done this. She never knocked on our door. She only cared that something she considered a valuable amenity was gone. Melissa's professional mask slipped slightly. Did you tell neighbors about your daughter's death? No, grief is private. We had no obligation to broadcast our loss to satisfy neighborhood gossip or property value concerns. This was our decision, our property, our daughter. We followed every legal requirement, obtained proper permits, hired licensed contractors. We did everything right, and we were still treated like criminals because we didn't consider how our daughter's death might affect someone else's real estate transaction. Karen Whitmore, your neighbor, told our station that she was simply trying to protect community standards and that she's now being harassed by neighbors who have turned against her. She claims you've deliberately tanked her property value in retaliation. Marcus felt anger surge hot and sharp. Karen is selling her house because she can't face the consequences of her own actions. She's calling us hostile because we won't landscape our daughter's grave to make it more aesthetically pleasing for potential buyers. Her real estate agent sent us a letter requesting aesthetic improvements and offering to pay for them. They want us to make Emma's final resting place look prettier so Karen can make more money. Melissa's eyes widened. Do you have that letter? Sarah appeared with the certified letter. Melissa read it on camera, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to visible disgust. I've covered property disputes for 5 years. This is unprecedented. This is who Karen is, Marcus said quietly. Someone who sees a grave and thinks property values. Someone who calls the police on grieving parents and then claims she's the victim when people object. Someone who spent weeks trying to punish us for having the audacity to bury our child without her permission. What do you want people to know, Mr. Chen? Marcus looked at the concrete slab, at the roses Sarah had placed there, at the space where Emma's laughter had once echoed off fence and water. I want people to know that Emma was real. She wasn't a property value calculation or an HOA violation. She was a girl who loved swimming in roses and helping neighbors with their gardens. She was kind and bright, and she had her whole life ahead of her. And when we lost her, we needed to say goodbye in a way that honored who she was. This was that place, our pool, our home, our daughter. His voice cracked. Karen could have understood that if she'd asked, if she'd knocked on our door like a neighbor instead of calling authorities like an enforcer. But she didn't. And now she's surprised that people are angry with her. She's surprised that consequences exist. She's calling herself a victim because the same community standards she weaponized against us are now being applied to her behavior. Melissa was quiet for a moment. Do you have anything you'd like to say directly to Ms. Whitmore? Marcus looked toward Karen's house, where her silhouette was visible in the window. I hope you sell your house quickly and move somewhere that understands you better than we do. Because this neighborhood, the people here, they understand that there are things more important than property values. They understand that grief deserves respect. And they understand that being a neighbor means showing basic human decency, not calling 911 because someone's tragedy inconveniences you. The interview ended. Melissa promised it would air that evening on the 6 o'clock news. She also mentioned, off camera, that she'd received multiple tips about Karen, complaints filed with various city departments over the years, disputes with other neighbors, a pattern of behavior that went back years. Your story is the breaking point, Melissa said, but it's not the beginning of Karen's problems with this community. After they left, Marcus and Sarah sat on the porch steps, exhausted. Neighbors began appearing. Word had spread about the news crew. Mrs. Patterson, Jennifer Vasquez, Tom Richardson, dozens of others. They formed a quiet vigil in the Chen's front yard, a barrier between the house and whatever Karen might try next. At 6 p.m., they all watched the news segment on someone's phone. Melissa Robbins had crafted it carefully. Marcus and Sarah's interview, footage of the concrete slab, shots of Karen's house with the for sale sign, and then a devastating montage of Karen's own words from her Facebook posts and the letter from her realtor. The anchor's commentary was measured but clear. This story raises important questions about the balance between property rights and human compassion, about the difference between community standards and community harassment. The segment ended with a title card. Update. The local HOA has removed Ms. Whitmore from its board and issued a formal censure. Multiple neighbors have filed harassment complaints. Channel 7 reached out to Ms. Whitmore for comment, but she declined to respond. Corinne's house went dark after the news aired. No lights, no movement. Her car remained in the driveway, but she might as well have been a ghost. The next morning, Marcus found a letter in his mailbox. Handwritten, on expensive stationery, Corinne's distinctive slanted script. Marcus and Sarah, I'm dropping the asking price another $20,000. My agent says the news story made the property radioactive. I've had 3 contracts fall through. I'm going to lose money on this house, money I was counting on for retirement. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed me. I know you think I deserve this, but I was only trying to protect my investment. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for Emma to die. I didn't ask to be the villain in your tragedy. But here we are. I hope you can sleep at night knowing what you've done to me. Corinne. Sarah read it over Marcus's shoulder, then quietly tore it into pieces. She still doesn't understand, Sarah said. No, she thinks we destroyed her. She thinks this is about revenge. What is it about? Marcus looked at the backyard where morning sun illuminated the concrete and roses. Consequences. She spent years thinking she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. Call authorities on people, file complaints, manipulate situations to her advantage. She probably got away with it dozens of times. But this time, she targeted the wrong people at the worst possible moment. And the community saw who she really was. Corinne's house sold 6 weeks later to a cash buyer who apparently didn't care about tragic backstories or property value disputes. The sale price was posted in the neighborhood group, $73,000 below the original asking price. Several people commented variations of karma. Corinne never spoke to Marcus and Sarah again. On moving day, Marcus watched movers load her belongings into a truck, Corinne directing them with the same sharp efficiency she'd brought to every HOA meeting. She never looked toward the Chen house. Not once. When the truck pulled away, Mrs. Patterson appeared at the fence. How do you feel? She asked. Empty, Marcus admitted. I thought I'd feel vindicated or satisfied, but I just feel tired. That's grief, Agnes said gently. The anger burns out and all that's left is the loss. Sarah joined them, staring at the now empty house next door. Someone else will move in. Someone who will ask questions first. Someone who will understand that fences separate properties, not human beings. And if they don't, Marcus asked. Sarah smiled sadly. Then they'll learn the same lesson Corinne did, that this community protects its own, and that there are lines you don't cross, no matter how good your justifications are. 3 months later, the new neighbors arrived. A family, parents in their 40s, 2 teenage boys, a golden retriever that barked enthusiastically at everything. They introduced themselves the first day, bringing cookies Sarah couldn't eat but appreciated nonetheless. I'm Mike, the father said. This is my wife Lisa. We're so glad to be here. The previous owner didn't leave much information about the neighborhood, but everyone we've met has been incredibly welcoming. If you ever need anything, just knock, Sarah said. That's what neighbors do. Mike noticed the concrete slab, the roses growing around its edges. That's a beautiful memorial space. My mother passed last year. We scattered her ashes in her garden. There's something healing about having them close. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. Yes, there is. Lisa knelt to smell the roses. These are gorgeous. What are they? Pink Belinda's, Sarah said. Emma's favorite. Emma was your daughter. Is, Marcus corrected gently. Is our daughter. Death doesn't change that. Lisa smiled. No, it doesn't. That evening, Marcus and Sarah sat in their backyard while the golden retriever barked at something in the new neighbor's yard, and teenage boy voices called out about dinner being ready. Normal sounds. Life sounds. Corinne never understood, Sarah said, watching fireflies begin to blink in the gathering dusk. That Emma is still with us. That this was never about erasing her, it was about giving her a home. The pool was a place of joy once. Now this is a place of peace. Marcus took her hand. Do you think she found peace? Karen, I mean. I don't know. I hope so. I hope she moved somewhere that made her happy, where property values matter more than people, where she can live without being reminded that the world is bigger than her investment portfolio. That's generous of you. Sarah shrugged. I'm tired of anger. It doesn't bring Emma back. It doesn't fix anything. Karen faced consequences for her actions, that's enough. She has to live with her choices. We have to live with ours. A splash came from the new neighbor's yard. They'd filled their pool, apparently. More teenage voices, laughter, a parent yelling about pool rules. Marcus smiled. Emma would have loved that, would have been over the fence in a heartbeat, making friends, offering to teach them diving techniques. She'd be 19 now, Sarah whispered. In college, studying biology probably, dating someone we'd pretend to disapprove of but secretly love, planning spring break trips. Yes. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely and the fireflies multiplied, blinking their Morse code messages across the yard. In the space where the pool had been, where Emma's ashes rested beneath concrete and roses, there was stillness, peace, an ending that was also somehow a continuation. Next door. The golden retriever barked again. A door slammed. Life went on, messy and beautiful and ordinary. And in the Chen's backyard, surrounded by roses that would bloom every summer in shades of pink, Emma remained where she'd always been happiest, home. Karen Whitmore, wherever she'd moved, would have to find her own peace with the choices she'd made. But here, in this yard on this quiet suburban street, consequences had run their course and karma had spoken its truth. Some lessons, Marcus reflected, are expensive. And some graves are worth defending, no matter the cost.